Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. I've had a special request for this webinar on the dismissive-avoidant attachment style, its challenges, and then how it interacts with other attachment styles. So I'm Corey. I'm an integrated attachment coach, which basically means I specialize in using the principles of integrated attachment theory to help people heal and understand their attachment patterns. I work with proven tools and methods rooted in neurobiology to help enhance the quality of life for people and help them to cultivate deeply satisfying relationships, which I think is something that most of us, if not all of us, truly want. So let's get started. I'm just going to bring up my screen here so you guys can see what I'm sharing with today. So let's get a little bit into what an attachment style is, just for anybody who isn't too sure. So, an attachment style is the set of subconscious beliefs that we have for love and connection. These rules can be in the form of beliefs we have about ourselves as well as others, the needs we have, what we expect in relationships, how we communicate, and how we set boundaries with others. So we are not born with an attachment style. It happens through conditioning and the way that neuroplasticity affects our minds. So this actually means we can recondition our attachment style to become more secure. So that's great news. All right, so let's get into the dismissive avoidant attachment style, starting off with some common characteristics. So these individuals are often seen as logical, rational, and grounded. They tend to approach life in a more practical, methodical way than a lot of the other attachment styles, and that can make them appear a bit more distant or detached from others. They can also be really slow to warm up to people and are a lot more guarded in their relationships, preferring to take time to really get to know somebody before they open up. One of their defining traits is the tendency to disconnect from their emotions, and they tend to often repress them as a way to maintain control and avoid vulnerability. And while this emotional detachment can make them seem self-reliant, it does create challenges in forming deep and intimate connections with others. Then underneath the calm exterior, dismissive avoidant individuals do experience a range of emotional patterns. These are typically shame, low-level anxiety, irritation, especially in situations that require emotional vulnerability with others. They can also have impatience and frustration, particularly when they're feeling pressured or overwhelmed by someone or a certain situation. Over time, this can lead to a certain level of emotional numbness or a sense of exhaustion and depletion because they struggle to process their feelings in a healthy way. Then, at the heart of the dismissive attachment style are deep-seated core wounds. So, these individuals typically tend to carry beliefs like, I am defective, I am unsafe, or I am or will be trapped. They may also feel incapable of change or believe that showing vulnerability to others will make them appear weak. Another few common core wounds are I am not enough, I am helpless, and this contributes to their fear of intimacy as well as their reliance on self-sufficiency. These beliefs do shape their behavior in relationships and make it difficult for them to fully trust others or engage in relationships. Then dismissive avoidant people are driven by several fears, the most common being feeling shamed, criticized, or hurt. And that's what leads to them being a bit more cautious about opening up than some of the other attachment styles. They also tend to fear feeling unsafe or being pushed too far outside of their comfort zone. For them, the idea of relying on others or working closely with people can be draining, and they often fear seeming incompetent or trapped in these dynamics. So for them, also conflict is particularly intimidating because it threatens their need for autonomy and control. And we will get more into their relationship with conflict in a later slide. So, in romantic relationships, these individuals value autonomy, independence, and freedom above all else. From their partners, they need appreciation, understanding, and acceptance. Harmony and peace are also essential to dismissive avoidance, as is time to decompress and recharge on their own. They also seek certainty, stability, and safety in their relationships, as these elements help them to feel secure without feeling overwhelmed. Then, as I mentioned, we're going to get into conflict more. So, when it comes to conflict, they tend to internalize their frustrations rather than express them directly. So, this could look like pretending to agree to something only to do what they actually want to later, just to avoid that conflict. In some situations, they may withdraw entirely, preferring to stop talking about the topic or even literally leaving the situation physically rather than have to engage in the conflict. If they do enter into conflict, though, they tend to remain more rational and grounded than the anxious attachment styles, carefully choosing their words and trying to see both sides of the situation. They do tend to analyze situations thoroughly, preferring to aim for the most logical resolution. Then dismissive avoidants also have a unique set of needs, as do all the attachment styles. For these guys, their need to feel safe and intellectually stimulated, and often thriving in environments that encourage consistent learning. So, positive reinforcement and words of affirmation do help to feel them valued and acknowledged. For them, they don't want these big grand words of appreciation like, oh, you're the best. They would prefer something like, I noticed you did the dishes the other day. I really appreciate you doing that. For them, it's the small words of encouragement that go a long way because using the big words of encouragement put a lot of pressure on them because then they feel like they have to live up to being the best. So, also for these individuals, they crave independence and autonomy and need space to be themselves. They prefer not to work intensively with others and want their opinions to be heard and respected. Above all, they do value logic and rationality in the people that surround them. So then boundaries with dismissive avoidance, they are incredibly important to them, and they do tend to set more extreme boundaries than the other attachment styles. They tend to be also more likely to establish their boundaries through actions rather than words, because for them, verbalizing their needs feels very uncomfortable, as well as it could be potentially prone to conflict. So they might also struggle with setting smaller, more frequent boundaries and instead rely on really large, rigid ones. When their boundaries are violated, they tend to feel trapped and often will withdraw as a means to protect themselves. Then, to manage their emotions and maintain their independence, they often rely on very specific coping mechanisms. They may withdraw to decompress. They also are very common for stonewalling or ignoring situations if they feel overwhelming. Then, passive aggression and numbing behaviors, such as binge watching TV, overeating, substance uses, or like indulging in other creature comforts are very common in this attachment style more than the other attachment styles because these strategies help them to avoid the emotional discomfort, but it does create distance in their relationships. And then finally, dismissive avoidant individuals do also have specific expectations in relationships. They often believe that their partner should always understand their need for space and that conflict should be minimal or non existent. They expect to maintain their independence fully in relationships without making compromises, and they often idealize a partner that is their perfect match. So this subconscious flaw finding technique helps them to avoid conflict as well as emotional reliance on others. So ultimately, they do expect their level of independence to remain unchanged, even if they're in a committed relationship. In relationships, the dynamic between a dismissive avoidant attachment style and an anxious preoccupied attachment style tends to create a cycle of misunderstanding, frustration, and emotional turbulence. These two styles fundamentally have different needs, behaviors, and responses to intimacy and closeness, which can make the relationship really challenging, but also potentially transformative if you have the right awareness and effort. So let's start by focusing on the dismissive avoidant partner in this dynamic. Individuals with this attachment style, again, often prioritize their independence, autonomy, and emotional self-sufficiency. They tend to feel overwhelmed or suffocated by too much closeness or emotional demands. They tend to withdraw or create emotional distance as a way to protect themselves. The withdrawal is not actually a rejection of their partner, but it's a coping mechanism to maintain their sense of safety and control. Then let's look at the anxious preoccupied partner. So individuals with this attachment style crave closeness, attention, and reassurance, and they're highly attuned to their partner's emotional availability and tend to interpret any signs of distance or disengagement as rejection or impending abandonment. So this then drives them to seek even more connection, often through frequent communication or attempts to resolve perceived issues. But the problem is their efforts to bridge the gap can actually push the avoidant partner away, and this reinforces the cycle. So this is what we call the pursuit distance cycle. It's one of the most common and painful patterns in relationships where one partner is anxious and the other partner is avoidant. The anxious partner's pursuit of closeness triggers the avoidant partner and their need for space. And so then the avoidant partner withdrawal techniques end up intensifying. And this creates an even more intense reaction and fear of abandonment from the anxious partner. So this ends up feeling like an emotional tug of war where both partners feel frustrated, misunderstood, and emotionally depleted. So understanding this dynamic is crucial because it highlights how the contrasting needs and behaviors of these two attachment styles can perpetuate this conflict, but it can also be an opportunity for growth. So with awareness, communication, and a willingness to meet each other halfway, these relationships can actually evolve into a space of mutual understanding and balance. Okay, so here we go. So I'm going to get into an example just to show you guys what this looks like. So if you were in a previous webinar I did about the anxious preoccupied attachment style, you might remember my example with Anna and Ben. So this time we're going to look at it from Ben's perspective. So this couple's been dating for about 6 months, and Ben, the dismissive avoidant partner, has been working late and has not been responding to Anna's texts as frequently as she would like. So Anna, being the anxious preoccupied partner, starts to feel disconnected in the relationship, and she starts to worry about the future of the relationship. So Ben is focused on his work and is genuinely busy. When he sees Anna's texts, he starts to feel overwhelmed by her need for constant reassurance. He interprets her messages as demanding and begins to feel smothered. Excuse me. To protect his sense of independence, he decides to not respond immediately, telling himself that he'll text later when he's less busy. His internal monologue might be something like, I just need some space, or why does she need so much attention? But then Anna notices Ben's lack of response and starts to feel rejected. She worries that he's losing interest in her or pulling away. Her fear of abandonment is triggered and starts to intensify, and she begins to overthink the situation. She starts sending more texts and hopes to hear from him, but his silence only fuels her anxiety. Then, when Ben finally sees Anna's collection of messages, he feels irritated and pressured, and he perceives her attempts to connect as an invasion of his personal space, and he responds with very short messages to set his boundaries. He might say something like, You're overreacting. I'm busy with work. Stop making everything about you. Then Anna interprets Ben's response as being cold and dismissive, which contributes to her sense of feeling hurt and rejected and further triggers that fear of abandonment. Her self-esteem takes a drop and she wonders, is she too much for him? She might become passive aggressive and make a remark like, I guess I'm just not important enough for you to text back, or escalate her pursuit by starting to call him repeatedly, trying to get the response she desires. But the more Anna seeks reassurance, the more Ben feels suffocated. So he pulls back even further, possibly suggesting they need space or questioning if they're actually even a good match. The withdrawal confirms Anna's worst fears, and now her anxiety is peaking. Feeling unheard and abandoned, Anna might have an emotional outburst and say something like, Why don't you care about me? Why are you pushing me away? And her fear of abandonment now is at its height, and she might even accuse Ben of not loving her or being emotionally unavailable. Ben is now feeling criticized and misunderstood, and he doubles down on his need for space. He retreats further into silence or dismisses Anna's concerns as being irrational. He might say she's being too sensitive or that he can't handle her constant neediness. And this deepens the emotional divide between them. So over time, this pattern continues where Anna's chasing Ben for connection and reassurance, while Ben is withdrawing to protect his independence. And neither partner feels understood, and the emotional gap continues to grow. So the key themes again in this cycle are the dismissive avoidant seeks space and emotional distance to maintain their autonomy and protect themselves from perceived demands. And the withdrawal can feel like emotional neglect, and the anxious partner is triggered with their anxiety. And of course, with the fear of abandonment and the need for emotional connection, the anxious partner excessively seeks reassurance and closeness, which overwhelms the avoidant partner. Does this sound familiar to anyone? I'm sure if you've been in an anxious avoidant type dynamic, this sounds very familiar. So for breaking the cycle, if that's something you're looking to do, which is the best way to move forward if you want to continue on a relationship that has an anxious and an avoidant partner, what you really need to do is recognize and work through these dynamics where both partners need to learn how to meet each other's emotional needs in a healthier way to create a more secure and fulfilling relationship. From the dismissive avoidance perspective, it's important to understand that their tendency to withdraw often stems from a need for independence and emotional safety. When they feel overwhelmed by their anxious partner's need for closeness, they might shut down or create distance to protect themselves. But again, this withdrawal can trigger the partner's fear of abandonment, and that leads to the push-pull dynamic where the anxious partner seeks connection and the avoidant partner further pulls away. So the first step is that you want to break the cycle using self-awareness. For this, the dismissive avoidant partner needs to reflect on their patterns of emotional distancing and how these behaviors impact their relationship. So, for example, they might notice their tendency to shut down or avoid difficult conversations when things feel too emotionally intense for them. Recognizing this pattern allows them to pause before reacting automatically and to choose a more balanced response. Then, of course, the next up is communication. That's key in any relationship that's a good relationship. Here, the dismissive avoidant partner can work on being more emotionally present and responsive, even if it feels uncomfortable for them. So instead of withdrawing completely, they can offer small gestures of acknowledgement, saying something like, I hear you, I just need a moment, or sending a quick text to reassure their partner. This can help to reduce tension and shows their anxious partner that they are valued and heard. And then, of course, creating space for emotional safety is also key. The dismissive avoidant partner can learn to stay more engaged in small, manageable ways without feeling overwhelmed, and at the same time, help encourage their anxious partner to practice self-soothing techniques like deep breathing or mindfulness to help manage the anxiety independently and not put that entire burden on their partner. The shared effort on both sides here helps to make both partners feel safe and connected without either feeling suffocated or rejected. So by taking these steps, the dismissive avoidant partner can play an active role in breaking the cycle and creating a more balanced and secure relationship. So let's get a little bit into the dismissive avoidant and fearful avoidant dynamic. So again, here the avoidant partner or dismissive avoidant partner prioritizes their independence and emotional self-sufficiency, and they can also often feel overwhelmed by emotional demands and withdraw to protect their sense of autonomy. When the fearful avoidant partner seeks closeness, the dismissive avoidant individual may interpret this as clinginess or neediness, and that can lead them to create even more distance in the relationship. They might struggle to understand their partner's fluctuating emotions and may respond with logic or detachment, which can feel cold and uncaring to a fearful avoidant partner. Then, meanwhile, the fearful avoidant partner craves intimacy, but is also deeply afraid of being hurt or abandoned. This fear creates a push-pull dynamic where they might seek closeness one moment and then withdraw the next, which can be really confusing for their partner. So when the dismissive avoidant partner pulls away, the fearful avoidant partner may feel rejected and intensify their efforts to connect, which can overwhelm the dismissive avoidant partner. So it's the cycle of pursuit and distancing that can leave both partners feeling misunderstood and frustrated. So again, understanding the cycle of this dynamic is the first step to breaking it. So once both partners have that awareness and can recognize the pattern, they can begin to make those changes that lead to better communication, greater security, and healthier emotional connections. So let's look at another example here to illustrate this. So we have Sarah and Alex. So Sarah is a dismissive avoidant, while Alex is a fearful avoidant. They've been in a relationship for about a year, and their dynamic is becoming increasingly strained. Sarah values her independence and often feels overwhelmed by emotional demands. When Alex expresses a need for closeness, Sarah interprets it as pressure and retreats to protect her sense of autonomy. Her internal monologue might be something like, I need space. Why does everything have to be so intense? Alex, then, on the other hand, is torn between wanting to feel close to Sarah and fearing that she'll reject him. When Sarah pulls away, Alex's fear of abandonment is triggered and he starts to overthink the situation. He might send a text, something like, I feel like you're avoiding me. Do you even care about us anymore? Then, when Sarah sees Alex's message, it makes her feel suffocated and irritated by the situation. So she might reply with something like, I'm just busy. You're overthinking this. Her withdrawal then confirms Alex's fears and spikes that anxiety again. So, feeling rejected, Alex oscillates between pursuing Sarah and retreating to protect himself. So, he might send another text a bit more passive aggressive, something like, Fine, I'll leave you alone. I guess you don't have time for me. So then Sarah's now feeling criticized and pressured and might pull away even further, saying something like, I can't handle this right now. You're being too much. And this creates that emotional divide between them. So over time, this pattern will continue with Sarah distancing herself to maintain her independence and Alex oscillating between seeking reassurance and withdrawing to avoid rejection. This leaves both partners feeling insecure and the emotional gap widens. So just to recap, the key themes in this cycle are that the dismissive avoidant seeks space and emotional distance to maintain their autonomy and protect themselves from those perceived demands. And then their withdrawal feels like emotional neglect to the fearful avoidant partner, which triggers their anxiety and ambivalence. Then the fearful avoidant individual is torn by their desire for connection and their fear of rejection, and they alternate between pursuing their partner and retreating to protect themselves. So this push-pull dynamic can feel confusing and overwhelming to their dismissive avoidant partner. So breaking the cycle between these two does require intention, effort, and a willingness to change. So the first step here is for both partners to recognize their attachment patterns and how they contribute to the cycle. So the dismissive avoidant partner might reflect on why they feel the need to pull away when the fearful avoidant partner expresses their emotions. Is it because they feel overwhelmed, or do they fear losing their independence? And then, of course, the fearful avoidant partner needs to explore why they oscillate between the closeness and the withdrawing. Is it because they fear rejection, or are they struggling to trust their partner? Once both parties understand their own behaviors, they're better able to communicate openly about their needs and fears. So the dismissive avoidant partner might say something like, I need some space to process my emotions, but it's not because I don't care about you. And then the fearful avoidant partner might respond with, I understand that, but I need reassurance that we're okay even when you're busy. So this kind of dialogue fosters understanding and reduces misunderstandings. Both partners can benefit from developing emotional regulation skills as well, with the dismissive avoidant partner working on staying more present during emotional moments instead of retreating, and taking a breath maybe and saying like, I hear you and I'm here for you. And then, of course, the fearful avoidant partner can learn to practice some more self-soothing techniques to manage their anxiety without relying solely on their partner for reassurance. They might journal their thoughts or practice mindfulness tools like breathing activities or engage in calming activities when they are feeling overwhelmed. So, this can help them to feel more secure and reduce the pressure on their dismissive avoidant partner. And then, of course, setting boundaries and creating mutual agreements can help both partners feel more secure. So they might agree on specific times to check in with each other. So that way, the fearful avoidant partner can feel reassured without the dismissive avoidant partner feeling smothered. So they could decide, let's say, to text each other once a day during the workday and then have a longer conversation in the evening or whatever it is that both partners agree to. They can also establish boundaries around personal space, with the dismissive avoidant partner suggesting that maybe they need an hour to themselves after work to unwind, but then after that, they can share that space. And then the fearful avoidant partner can respect the boundary while also establishing their need for connection by saying something like, I understand you need space, but I do need quality time together after you recharge. So, by increasing the self awareness, practicing emotional regulation skills, and establishing those clear boundaries, we can break the cycle of distancing and ambivalence. And so, over time, this can build a relationship where both partners feel secure, understood, and emotionally fulfilled. Now, let's quickly look at a healthier dynamic, the dismissive avoidant partner with a secure partner. So, here, the dismissive avoidant partner might still feel uncomfortable. Well, chances are they will still feel uncomfortable with that emotional closeness and that vulnerability, especially in moments of conflict or heightened emotions. But the key difference here is how the secure partner responds. So the secure partner might notice the dismissive avoidance partner tendency to withdraw, and they'll respond with more patience and understanding. So instead of pressuring them for emotional intimacy, the secure partner can create a safe, non-judgmental space for the dismissive avoidant partner to open up at their own pace. Because the secure partner provides consistent support without overwhelming the dismissive avoidant partner, the dismissive avoidant can feel more secure and comfortable with that emotional connection. And over time, this will build trust and allow the partner to gradually lower their defenses to engage more deeply in the relationship. Okay, so the way that this dynamic helps is the securely attached person with a dismissive avoidant person. That relationship can be delicate but rewarding. Again, the key here is patience and respect. So when one person pulls back for space, the secure partner doesn't take it personally, chase them, or panic. And that diffuses the pressure on the person who's dismissive avoidant. They know that it's their partner's way of coping, and that doesn't mean that they're being rejected. When it comes to emotional sharing, the securely attached person is open and clear about their feelings, but also recognizes that pushing too hard will create discomfort for their partner. So they tend to express a need for connection, but give their partner the freedom to engage at their own pace. So this creates an environment of safety where the avoidant partner can gradually open up through that consistency and understanding by the secure partner. Rather than triggering that vulnerability is unsafe, it tends to create that stability for both partners, and it deepens that trust. This allows the dismissive avoidant partner to open up in smaller and more meaningful ways, knowing that emotional closeness is a gradual process. So it's not about forcing change here, but about creating a space where both partners can feel secure. And then a quick note on insecure attraction. So, our attachment wounds often become most apparent when we start forming deeper emotional connections with others, when we allow ourselves to truly let someone in. People with insecure attachment styles often find themselves drawn to others who share similar patterns because, on a subconscious level, we tend to seek out what feels familiar, even if it's not healthy. So, securely attached people, on the other hand, feel too calm, too stable, or even too loving for people that have a more insecure attachment style, at least on an unconscious level. So, we might push them away through things like self-sabotaging behaviors because the consistency feels uncomfortable or unfamiliar. But again, when we start to heal our own attachment wounds and start to build a more secure attachment to ourselves, something shifts within us, and we start attracting people who show up in a way that feels safe and grounded to our subconscious mind. Our relationships begin to reflect the emotional security that we've cultivated within ourselves and allow us to choose a love that's more nourishing and stable instead of chaotic or uncertain. So, to heal a dismissive avoidant attachment style, it's a gradual process that requires self awareness, emotional openness, and the development of healthier attachment dynamics. So, the goal is to create emotional security within yourself, reduce reliance on emotional distance as a coping mechanism, and build a more balanced way of relating to others. We can do this through developing self awareness and identifying triggers, by noticing specific situations or behaviors in relationships that cause you to withdraw or shut down. This involves understanding patterns that cause you to feel overwhelmed, such as when your partner seeks emotional closeness or expresses vulnerability. So, for example, if you notice yourself pulling away when your partner wants to discuss feelings, recognize that this is a trigger. So instead of reacting immediately, you want to pause and ask yourself, why do I feel this way? Is there a past experience that might be influencing my reaction? By becoming aware of these triggers, you can start to change your automatic responses. Then, of course, you need to build your emotional regulation skills. So you want to learn how to tolerate and process emotions rather than avoiding them. Practices like mindfulness, journaling, and therapy or coaching can help you to sit with uncomfortable feelings without shutting down. So, for example, the next time you feel overwhelmed by your partner's emotional needs, try a grounding exercise like focusing on your breath or writing down your thoughts, because this can help you to stay more present and engaged rather than retreating into your emotional distance. And then use practices like opening up to practice vulnerability in small steps by sharing your emotions with people that you really trust. So start with something really small just to build your confidence in expressing that vulnerability. So if you're uncomfortable with sharing your feelings, try instead saying something like, I've been feeling a bit stressed lately, without really diving deep into what those emotional experiences are. And do that to somebody who's a close friend or partner, somebody that you feel like you can trust. And over time, this can help you to become more comfortable with emotional intimacy. And of course, you want to challenge avoidant thought patterns, because a lot of times avoidants rationalize emotional distance by telling themselves they don't need closeness or that relationships are too demanding. So, for example, if you think, I don't need anyone, I'm fine on my own, you want to counter this thought with something like, even though I value my independence, connections with others can also enrich my life. And that helps to reframe your perspective on relationships. And of course, we need to be able to set healthy boundaries without shutting down. So you want to do this in a way that respects your need for space without completely shutting out your partner. You want to do this kindly and clearly. So instead of saying something like, I need space, leave me alone, you could try something like, I need some time to recharge, but I'll check in with you later. This approach allows you to maintain connection while still honoring your need for independence, because it really comes down to finding a right balance for both partners. And then, of course, fostering secure relationships by seeking out relationships with emotionally secure individuals who can model attachment behaviors that are healthy can make a difference as well, whether that's through friends, romantic partners, or family members. So you want to have people that respect your boundaries while also encourage emotional openness. So if you've been in relationships where you felt smothered, make a conscious effort to connect with people who are calm, consistent, and understanding, and notice how their secure attachment behavior helps you to feel safe with opening up over time. And you also want to embrace emotional intimacy in a gradual way. So, doing it in smaller, manageable steps by involving maybe sharing more about your day, expressing appreciation for people, or asking your partner about their feelings. So, if you're used to having conversations that are more surface level, instead you could ask your partner something like, "How are you really feeling like?" or "How are you really feeling about this?" And that small step can actually deepen your connection with your partner without feeling overwhelming. You'd also want to take some time to cultivate your self-worth beyond independence. by recognizing that your worth is not solely tied to your independence or self-reliance. So if you're feeling uncomfortable with relying on others, try affirming something like, it's okay to need support sometimes. I am worthy of love and connection. This helps you to reframe your identity belong just or beyond just being somebody who's the strong one. And work towards developing secure attachment through something like therapy or coaching. Therapy or coaching, especially ones that are based in attachment focused type topics. This can be incredibly helpful with healing a dismissive avoidant attachment style. A therapist or coach can help you to discover more of how you can manage this. Therapists tend to help you unpack past experiences to understand your patterns, whereas coaches help you to focus on current emotional experiences to help you understand your attachment dynamics. So just kind of depends if you want to dig into your past or if you'd rather use current examples for that. So this brings me to the end of today's information and presentation. So thank you so much for taking time to explore this topic. I hope after this video you can walk away with a better understanding of this and the dismissive avoidant attachment style. If you did find value in this, I invite you to connect with me on any of the platforms that I'm on. I do my best to regularly share information and resources, and you can find all the ways to reach out to me here on the screen. So again, thank you so much. And if you do have any requests for future webinars, please just let me know. So yeah, thank you, everybody. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, night, whatever it is, wherever you are. Thank you so much for being a part of this.